So welcome everyone. Today we have with us Heidi Araya from US, and she is Director of Enterprise Agility, Lean Agile Transformation Consultant, and I think she's doing many other things. I will hand over to her to introduce herself. So some housekeeping rules so we can have a good session. Please, when you have joined, mute yourself. If you have any questions, write them on in QA. I can go through the questions and mention to Heidi. By joining this session, you also earn 1 Scrum education unit, and we're also recording this session, so we will put it on our social media within next 1 to 2 days. So we have 1 hour. I will not take more time. And today's topic is the role of project management in an agile environment. So over to you, Heidi, and welcome once again.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today. This is a topic that I found a lot of people are really uncertain about. So I've done this topic and I really enjoy it. Yeah, how do we handle project management? Is such a thing as projects in Agile and project manager. So I am really passionate about this topic, which is why I decided to do this talk. So if you can use I'd love to know what your role is so that we can talk accurately to you about this as we go through the talk. So if you wouldn't mind just writing real quick in the Zoom chat, if you have access to it, that'd be awesome. I'll just wait. I'll just move on while you're doing that, unless someone wants to just speak up. Project manager, become Scrum Master. Thank you. Thank you. And I super appreciate you joining. So today we're going to share just potential issues that face project managers, new ways of communicating project and product information, and then new responsibilities that project manager, and if you're in a PMO or organize a PMO, that you can take on in Agile environments too. So it's very applicable for anybody, I think, in Agile. Thanks for sharing your role. So if you remember back in the day when it was all plan driven, and plan driven is often called waterfall, when we had to write reams of requirements, so very big stacks of documents. First, the requirements documents, and multiple people collaborated on those. Sometimes we had contractors come in from outside the company to help write the requirements. Then the design documents, which is like architecture, any analysis. And then finally, you get these hundreds of pages together. Actually, sometimes that took 9 months or so. Then you could start implementing, right? And then you implement for a long time, these people working together and not so much together. Then you try to integrate all that work together in an environment, and then you go to test it. That's when the problem started. But we're 90% done. Like, look at it. It's really almost done. So you spend a lot of time in the testing phase, and you finally get to deploy it. And oftentimes you had to cut corners, either with quality or scope or something. And so along the way, I wanted to share this history because this has really changed now. Obviously, we learn from each iteration, and I have a really impactful story from NASA where we did a project like the top, and then I was called in to rescue it, and we did it like Scrum, and the project iterated, and it was not even resembling the beginning request, which was a travel request form, just front and back on a page, put it on the company intranet. And then when we ended up, it was very complex with business logic, routing to different travel arrangers and preparers, and that took 1.5 years. And my lesson from that was people think they know what they want, but they often don't until they see it. And that's also why we do this Agile method, right? We learn along the way, we can iterate along the way. And furthermore, of course, we're building quality in from the very beginning. So we begin learning right away, right? So you know this. And what I often hear in my travels is people frustrated saying, that's not Agile. It's like not a binary choice. And so I'm just giving some examples here of trade-offs that we make. We get frequent feedback, or do we not get feedback? Do we release something and never find out what people are doing with it? Do we have no upfront requirements? Or do we have all of these requirements up front? And so these are basically, I look at them as sliders along the way that you can adjust. So it's not black and white. And so I think that's important to know. And when I hear somebody saying that's not Agile, I try to dig in and find about what their frame of mind is about what Agile, and also remember that we're all most of us live in an organization, enterprise context where the organization has, maybe it's a business to business environment, and have customers who are expecting certain kinds of roadmaps. And so there's lots of complexities around Agile or not. It's basically how responsive can we be to the environment is how Agile we are, not by the practices that we follow, but how responsive to the environment. So thanks everyone for using the chat. I don't want this to be one way, so I'd love to know if you could rate yourself with your Agile knowledge. Agile Newbie, I know the basics. Getting the hang of it is the middle of the road, number 3. And 4, I think I know more about Agile than most people. And 5, I'm an expert. I want to paste in the chat there. All right. Cool, thanks for the response. Awesome, I appreciate that. It makes me feel like I'm talking to actual humans. Thanks so much. All right, so these are some potential issues that face project managers in transition. So a project, if you're looking at it from a project manager mindset, is it supposed to be a temporary effort? This is the definition of a project, has a start and an end. You have a defined start and end date, some predefined outcome most of the time with specific things. So on time, on budget, on scope is like success criteria for that. Whereas a product is a different kind of thing. If you're working on software, you may work on it for years and years. Maybe there's no one hard start or finish to the features. The features can be iterated on and added onto for years. So how do we define a start date? Maybe the software's been living for years here. When will we stop using this? Oftentimes it's being maintained for years, even if there's no active new development going on. And we evolving our outcomes based on feedback. And so what I want to bring up to mind is really some of the ideas that people have about, and the issue that they take with the word project manager is just that this. Some of those ideas underlying this project management conflict with the realities. And that's part of this project product tension, I think, that you'll see from some people who really take issue with the word project manager with Agile teams. But there's lots of things that you can do. The concept of project does really exist also, even if you have an Agile environment. But let's talk about what you used to be doing. Perhaps iron triangle was so important, like I said. Scope, budget, end date. By the way, if you didn't know, that's called the iron triangle. They figured that those are the 3 things that are really a key. But instead, now we're going to focus on business outcomes in Agile environment. Project manager in an old plan-driven used to control most aspects of the schedule, plan in detail, especially with Gantt chart, dependencies, and critical path. Is used to perhaps assigning tasks to each person on the project so that they can know their percent allocation and how much work they can work on that project and how long it might take them. In project management, they talk about monitoring and controlling the details, risk management. How can we control risk? How can we control this? It's all about controlling. And at the very end, of course, you're supposed to have a lessons learned, but by then it's often too late. Will you ever do a similar project like this again? Is anyone ever going to look at it? Is it in a place that's accessible? And the customer often sees a product close to the end in this plan-driven world. And so the last part is really, really important. The project manager is used to perhaps managing and controlling. So the transition to a new one is coordinating and facilitating. So I just want to pause here and talk about that facilitation, because as we go through this deck, you'll see a lot of places where the opportunities for project managers to be successful rely heavily on great facilitation skills, okay? Working with people a lot more, working with teams, and how can you have a good outcome? I'm just gonna give a quick example. Let's say you're across a team and the 2 teams are not working well together, right? They're saying, well, I don't wanna help you because I have my own stuff to do. And you might need to facilitate some kind of gathering together to resolve this conflict and move ahead. So those are some things I would say focus on understanding the facilitation skill. So I'm just going to pause here for a minute and read this question that I'm figuring to understand where a PM stands in Agile Scrum team role, Scrum Master, Product Manager, and team. Great question. So in the Scrum framework, I have a slide coming up on that. Hold on, let me see if this. Next, no, but let me just pause here and answer your question. The Scrum team shares project management duties. There you go, this is the slide. Okay, so let's imagine that you had one Scrum team. Do you need a project manager? No. I mean, they might have a manager, but if it's just one team, it's not really a lot of project management need going on. They share, the idea of a Scrum team is that they're sharing the project management duties. The product owner organizes the backlog. They take charge of the sprint planning. The Scrum Master will do certain things, and the development team is organizing and picking their own work out of the queue. If you just have one Scrum team, then I would say you don't need a project manager, but that's not the reality that most of us live in. Do we have something? Okay, so hang on. Scrum Master, Product Manager, and Team. Okay, I think I'm gonna help. As we go through this, I think you'll understand more about what I'm talking about. I'd love to answer your questions also. So let me just, do we have something in between manages and controls and coordinates and facilitates, or combination of all four? I think probably. Haven't thought about it like that, but let's go on. And let me go back to this previous slide for just a moment. All right, so why? Who of you, if you want to just, paste in the chat, me or yes or something, Agile doesn't require this sort of reporting. Don't you trust us to deliver? Or why do we need project managers on a Scrum? There is no project manager in Agile. If you need a project manager, you're doing it wrong. And of course, like I said, the Scrum Master, Scrum is popular and they never talk about Scrum Masters. So that's why I think you're seeing some of this thing. Okay, we're gonna move along and we talked about this. So yeah, I think I addressed this one sufficiently right now. We all know the Scrum model, but basically they're sharing duties. So now, what do you do in a case like this? This is a real scenario that I had. I had 5 teams working towards one goal on one product. And when I was brought in, they were like, oh my gosh, how do I report progress? Remember, each team is working on their own thing. They all shared goal, shared product, right? They all had their individual areas, but how do we coordinate across the teams? So you can say, well, you can have a scrum of scrums, but who's leading that? Who's coordinating? So across there's how are we going to report progress? Oftentimes the tools that we have, the Agile tools and our real way of working do not include such things as, for example, any deployment efforts. So the team has their own, let's say, definition of done, but what about that larger scope? How do I do testing at this larger scope? Who sets up the production environment and who's in charge of that? Who does the final decision for deployment and things like this? So we need to understand how we coordinate across teams, communicate with each other about our dependencies and risks, especially because I find that most teams aren't really entirely cross-functional and they can't own it all. Right? And sometimes they just have multiple stakeholders. So this quote here is from Johanna Rothman, and her book is really awesome, and I have it as a resource at the end. Scaled Agile is simply program management, okay? So if you have this scenario and no one is in this area right now, here's an immediate opportunity for you. Even if your official title or your past history was project manager, you have a huge opportunity here to pull it all together and provide real value for stakeholders. So I'm gonna move on and show you that. Okay, so safe, be good for which, are you talking about safe, Majid, the safe, be good for a situation like this? Like this particular scenario I'm talking about? If it's just, okay, multiple Scrum teams, sure. What if you just have 10 Scrum teams in the whole company? Do you think safe would still be appropriate? Safe is really meant for very, very, very large enterprises. So I wouldn't necessarily jump to safe just because you have 5 teams, or even, let's say I worked with a company that had 2 groups of 5 teams. They had 2 products and it was 5 teams here and 5 teams there. Okay. Safe would be overload. Okay, but yes, to your point, one of the pain points I have seen is that companies start growing, or they have multiple teams and they're trying to work on the same thing, but they don't actually have that scaled structure in place. So what would you do? Hang on. Can someone mute?
Yeah, please mute yourself if you're not asking any question.
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you. So
Thank you.
it seems logical that people would think about this, but somehow when they go to Agile, they like all of their logic sometimes flies out the window. They're not thinking about this, like, oh, we're doing Scrum and we don't know any better. So we're just, how do you tying things together? Stakeholders still want to see progress towards a goal or vision, even if it does evolve. They want to see this transparency where it's at. You people are actually, believe it or not, considering end-to-end delivery from the time the thing comes in the queue and the team is working on it to the things that are necessary to get it tested in a maybe integration environment. Do you have UAT and do you get it out in production? Who maintains that production environment? Just over and over again, and I don't know if it's whether your experience as well, but over the past 10 years, very few people are considering that. And that's one thing, you know, obviously that project manager would find value. They have no idea how to deliver software once they go Agile because it's something very new and they haven't really set themselves up for success yet. And oftentimes I find, and maybe you too, that they don't really know what they're doing, right? They just decide to pick up Scrum. And we've talked about it already in the chat here. Mass confusion and angst about roles and responsibilities in the scaled environment. So Scrum itself, sure, we don't need that, but how will we scale our processes so if you have this project management background, or if you're passionate and you love coordinating and helping others, you have a lot of opportunities to make a difference here, really do. So here's the potential issues that you face. Kind of touched on that, right? Scrum doesn't need project managers. Teams are doing that. Project versus product is a new idea for them. So if I'm a project manager and somebody thinks that I need to be here, but I have no idea what my actual value is going to be, so what do I handle versus the team? And then resource allocation changes. Resource allocation being in standard waterfall projects, you might have people allocated across 3 or 4 different initiatives and work part-time on them. In Agile teams, we try to staff them up full-time so that we get flow. So it's this idea of flow efficiency versus resource efficiency. And of course, Agile tools are really unable to handle familiar reporting, especially if teams are not in fact cross-functional. And that's one of the gaps that I find, that the most common tools cannot handle them. They're just not meant to, but people aren't really aware of that. So we can actually do better. I believe we can do better at setting people up for success in this role. PMO also, right? I won't touch on this a huge deal, but PMO also is having angst. Where did the PMO fit in? How do I be collaborative advising and seen as a partner, not being like commanding and controlling you to deliver by this deadline? How do we change from thinking about outcomes? How do we work smaller to deliver some valuable features along the way? And of course, people still want to know that answer. When will it be done? If you look at this, I find it really funny. This is an actual screenshot from a project. And it says on the very right-hand side, oh, the schedule's green, so we're gonna be on time. Resourcing, we got enough people. Budget, yeah, it's green. Risks, okay, not that many risks, but somehow we're not gonna get the benefits out of it that we thought. And I'm just thinking, you know, have you ever heard of this concept of called watermelon project, where it's green on the outside and red on the inside? Meaning that the green is just a sham, and everybody knows there are major problems with this. And actually, I worked one place where they had told me, Heidi, you cannot change it from green to yellow or red without permission. You could imagine what that did to you know, all the projects were green up until the very last moment. And then we discover, oh no, it really wasn't working out. But a lot of this stuff could actually be, if you set the teams up to be cross-functional teams delivering something, you could get rid of a lot of manual reporting and have it all automated. If you're delivering something regularly, again, why are people worried about when are we going to get there? If you're regularly delivering stuff, some of those questions will be going away. So I find the reality though is teams aren't often able to deliver something regularly, and that's part of the problem here with the need for project management still in an Agile environment. And okay, so you should be getting better transparencies into actual status. You should be, remember, we're incorporating testing, and we're incorporating hopefully regular releases at least into a test environment, especially one that's hopefully similar to production environment. Using online tools, there should be less manual reporting angst. Reduce risk. If you're delivering something regularly, you're going to be integrating it regularly, and that greatly reduces risk. And this is something that people don't focus on enough, I think, is delivering regularly reduces risk greatly. A benefit would be faster ROI if you are able to get it out to production. I know that a lot of places are still struggling with this idea of return on investment by delivering smaller features frequently, because they think that their customers won't really, it's not very useful for their customers. So yeah, if you're experiencing that, I'd love if you just paste it in the chat. I've worked at places that they like, we can't possibly deliver something not complete to the customer because it won't be useful for them, right? So they're afraid of this feedback. And hopefully higher customer satisfaction due to stakeholder and customer involvement. So let's talk about new responsibilities that you can take on in Agile environments. So I have here again the word coordinate and clarify. So if you wouldn't mind pasting in the chat what kind of Agile tool you're using. You are using one. If you have a board, just a physical board, just type that in there. I'd love to know. I find teams are usually skewed one way or anyway, okay, I'd love to see that. Oh, cool. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Okay, so what can you do if you're a project manager? In a previous company, we had really large initiatives, like there's something called like the federal cloud. So if you are working with the federal government, they have very specific requirements. JIRA, MS project, thank you. The federal government has very specific requirements on the cloud environment that you're supposed to be using. Who's going to tie that together if it involves every single team inside the company? So you still need to coordinate these large efforts. There are so many examples of this, any sort of compliance effort, and making sure goals and milestones and value proposition is clear. Just see. So offshore partners. I worked at a place where we had an offshore partner, and there was not a lot of great coordination across the across all the teams. And so we did have a project manager pull it together, and she did an amazing job. Just saying, like, all right, so for enterprise level, you could also make sure that there are some best practices for each team, right? So instead of getting, hey, what the heck is going on here? You're now, and it doesn't matter your role, and I have, you know, your title here. Some people might call it project manager. Some people might call it agile leader, or whatever your title might be now. It doesn't matter. The idea is that you're still providing this value. So where you see an opportunity, I would say start coordinating those large efforts. They exist in every single company that I've been in. All right, so let's go. Sorry. Okay, when will it be done? How many of you get this question regularly? And how can you do that when you're accommodating changes in the project? All right, so something I've been asked completely. And I want to ask you, when people say, when will it be done? Have you chatted about what that means? If you don't know where you're going, any road might take you there, or perhaps no road. And I've had people say, well, I'll know it when I see it. Well, not really. That doesn't really end up being successful at all. So this is your first opportunity, right? If someone asks you, when will it be done? Try to define with them, what does done mean? Your criteria for success. A lot of companies are still using just, I'm delivering that thing to production as success. What is the business outcome that they want out of it? If 5 customers pick it up in the first week, if 50 customers pick it up in the first, like some revenue. So that's a conversation that you can start to have it. If they're not having it, sometimes it's a really big cultural shift. So find out what done means very explicitly. It's like definition of done, for this milestone. And communicate the vision and goals and criteria for success clearly. This is a huge opportunity for you, and this is where some of your facilitation skills could come in handy. All right. So when will we be done? So once you've defined what you know, when will we be done on what done really means, now you can start to break the work down into phases or outcomes or some sort of measurable goals. The idea is you can't possibly go a whole year without providing any update or input, but the thing might really realistically last a year. We want to break the work down into phases. Often people time call this release plan or some milestones that you can break it down into. So work with whoever you need to work with to create those plans, okay? If you need to consider a fixed deadline, and I've worked at a lot of places where we had actually fixed deadline. Is it a holiday? Need to get this done for the holiday? Is it a conference? Is it for marketing? If you miss that date, it's a huge, huge miss for the company. Cannot afford that. So fixed deadline, entirely reasonable in Agile. Then we have to talk about limiting scope. Then you can have conversations about how, if you need this entire scope and we have a fixed deadline, can we limit the scope inside each feature? So these are things that you have discussions on, and that's where you can be extremely helpful. Let me know if we have a fixed deadline. Do we have a fixed scope? How can we limit risk and start by limiting scope inside each feature? What do you need in order to deliver this business value, right? And the biggest thing I've found is people want to just add more people. That will get you there faster. I've never seen that work. If the most important thing that I found that helps people be successful is someone removing their impediments. And why is, you might ask, why isn't that the Scrum Master? Well, a lot of times the Scrum Master doesn't get to raise these above the team level, or they've said it. And I'll give you a real example from my history. So I was working at a place and I was listening into some of the daily stand-up meetings, and I would hear people say like, oh, I'm blocked, the environment's down, or the environment's not working or something. The word environment kept coming up. So I asked people after a little while, start telling me every single day how many hours today you were blocked by environmental challenges. And I stuck with it for a sprint, or 2 sprints, by the way. And then I counted up those hours, and across 2 teams, it was 200 lost hours due to environments, some issue. So then I created a little chart, took it to management and said, hey, it's 200 hours. You really want to lose 200 hours. Is a huge opportunity for you to talk about raising up impediments and fixing their impediments, but that requires listening and understanding. Already said that. All right, so showing the value of transparency and regular progress. So this is going to be a new concept for people, okay? Don't assume that because they are now working in an Agile environment, they understand all the benefits that they're going to get from it. So wherever you can, and in your role, is the team actually cross-functional? Can they deliver design-tested working software every few weeks? Let's start with that. Validating with actual customers would be amazing, and a lot of companies aren't there yet. I'm being pragmatic. I worked with a team that I was able to change them to a cross-functional team by working with leadership and getting a dedicated architect to say that architect was split across 2 or 3 teams, but every time team A had a question about architecture, they would go to this particular person. So they had a point person. Okay, so wherever you can, make sure that the team is enabled. That's a great opportunity for you. Progress is self-evident if you're able to deliver that. And so here I come to the next part. So this is the JIRA tool, and it's the one I'm most familiar with, and I think it's one that most people are using in my history. The structure here is important. The structure here is very important. We have, you may or may not use the initiative level. JIRA requires the epic, story, task, and subtask. So if you want to show progress to something, it should be tied to an epic, at least, and stories, and if you have subtasks, use subtasks. I had teams that were creating back-end tasks and front-end tasks. And I'm going to say it's not ideal, and I don't know if it's something that's new to you, or it's just been my experience where teams produce tasks instead of story because they do handoffs. But the idea of something done for that particular story is if there's a back end and front end, it will just hand off and it will take longer. You're not actually delivering value. A story is meant to deliver some sort of value. All right, so I find that people miss that. So Majid, you said in almost every sprint, we're being pushed to complete all the story points. to push the release date to go ahead. So that sounds like you're working a lot of overtime to get stuff done. So if you ping it back in the chat, I'll read it. Oh, nope. Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. So is that I'll chat. Release date is getting extended. Okay, I get it. Thank you. Okay. As a project manager, or whatever your role might be, or title, you need to learn new ways of communicating information. This is ways that people may not be familiar with. They're going to be struggling with it, and this is a huge opportunity for you. I had a project where the customer had a backlog. They were pretty sure they wanted to get these particular things done, but they gave us feedback along the way. Okay, so I created this in Excel, and you can do it any way you want. But so the blue is actually the team's backlog, and you can see that the team's backlog grew over time. Of course, it did, because we were adding stuff, because we had we had stuff that we knew we had to do. And over here you've got yellow. The yellow is actually the customer feedback. So in this instance, unlike my the first story I had at NASA where it changed completely, we got some feedback, but it still ended up being more or less what they wanted at the end. So when people are curious about when it will be done and they're not understanding why it's not done yet, because the feedback that you're getting and incorporating is not visible to them, you can make the changes visible in this way. It's just one idea that I had for doing that. There are other ways of doing that in an automated way. And I had one product owner come to me and say, I love this chart, and I'll show you another one that you can have in JIRA. I love this chart because it tells me that I'm the one adding the stories, and that's why the release isn't going out, right? I'm the problem here. But he really liked this. And in JIRA also, I'm showing this, but I'm sure other tools have this too, right? A cumulative burn up or burn down towards a goal. You could have, in JIRA, it's called a fixed version that gives you a release. What's the name of it now? It's a release plan, sort of like projection, right? And this will tell you, it basically projects out. Now here are the caveats with this particular widget inside of JIRA. It assumes that you know everything that's going into the release. It assumes that you've got those stories already lined up. And if you're using story points to measure this fixed version release plan burn up, then it will only work, well, I'll say it will work best if you've got it all story pointed out. So if you have a huge release coming up, I would just break it down smaller. And the red does tell you, though, the % of unestimated issues. So you could get a good sense of that, but it just won't give you the full timeline. So this is JIRA without any add-ins, standard one. So it does give you the projection out there, but it's only going to be as accurate as what it knows. So what I've done with other teams is I've actually changed this. You can change this inside of JIRA from story points to number of issues. And that way it just counts the number of issues and you don't have to have them estimated. Okay, so this is just one idea. And when you show this, by the way, it might be a new concept for people to show this idea of cone of uncertainty. So here's what we know right now. And every day when issues get closed out, this projection is going to be self-adjusting, right? So if you show that frequently, people get this idea, right? And you can show forecasts for the product milestone, right? Has anyone used this chart before? Just curious. Okay, so let's say you have a date-driven goal, and this is called a Scatterplot. We're using actual data cycle time here. So cycle time is the amount of time it takes from the time you start it until the time it finishes. So let's say you have got 100 items in your backlog and you're working your way and you've got 50 or 60 of them done already. You can actually look at the data. Hang on, I'm moving the things, I can see it. So you can actually look at this data and say, well, 73% of the items that we worked on, we delivered in 7 days or less. It will give you a really, really good idea of forecasting, okay? 90%, if you really want to get more and more certain, then 90% were in 14 days or less. So now you can say this particular throughput, this particular cycle time, how certain do you want to be with your actual data? And you can go on, it's a really great, great tool, is actionableagile.com. So I encourage you to go there and check it out. I just love this kind of data because you can actually use it for good. And you can talk about certainty, like a forecast, like weather, and understanding that with the new information it changed.
In addition, just to further go into our facets here on the left, as I was kind of getting into in my last sort of presentation, you can see we have a lot more enrichment here in the three main agreement types, because now we are incorporating information from Matterhorn.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I don't know.
I was thinking it was related to this. Right, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Great.
continue, Heidi. Sorry for this disruption. I have
Yeah, no,
it. Yeah,
no worries.
I thought
No
that
worries.
was a question.
Yeah, I thought they were going to add an additional point too. No worries. Okay, so we can also show a forecast for the remaining work. I instituted this JIRA portfolio tool in a previous company, and we were pulling together multiple teams that were working towards the shared milestones and goals. And this is a way you can also forecast. So remember, a forecast is only a forecast. So when you think about it like weather, you can share the idea that it's subject to change with new information. So what we've done in previous companies, and it might work for you, is to share something generic, like, I think we can get this done in this particular quarter, if you're thinking about quarters of work. So I think I can get this done in second quarter. When you get into the second quarter, you say, well, I think it will be done in July or May or whatever. And when you get into that month, you can say, I think it will go out in this particular sprint, so it will be like May 20th, whatever the case might be, right? You're changing the conversation now to get more refinement along the way. And again, it's like cone of uncertainty. Okay, so for sure, managing communications. Can we do something? So, Sarfaraz, I'm reading your thing. Can we do something in the rest of the areas? You mean, can you describe or type in what other areas you're meaning? I mean, maybe I'll touch about it, but feel free. Initiation. Okay, perhaps when we get to the end, would you mind unmuting when we get to the end when I'm taking questions, and then I'd love to address it. Okay, okay, cool, thanks. So, all right, so these are standard widgets in JIRA. The visualization of your information is specific to your scenario, and there's no one magical way that you're gonna say, I'm gonna provide this report and it's gonna answer every single question. This is like a JIRA thing too. How many stories, oops, sorry, I clicked. How many stories are complete in this release, right? We were looking to find out the risk of unpointed stories. So 18 of those stories have points in future sprints. So if they're tagged with a sprint, then only 18 of those 98 were story points. So we can start thinking about, are we getting better or worse in that area, and how far out do we want to do? The number of epics in this release. This was a large release, and we had, so we had small epics, but 30 closed, 20 open, 5 in progress. If you had 15 in progress, you might start to worry, how can we limit our work? And created versus resolved in this release. So this is where the product owner came to me and said, oh, I've created 11 issues that are supposed to go into this release, so now I know I'm the problem. Right, so if you are creating many more than you resolved, it's just show that to the person and say, like, hey, this release is supposed to go out on this day, but I want to let you know we keep adding issues, be it defects, new things. It's a way for them to sit back and reflect a little bit of the impact on that release date. Okay. All right. another opportunity for you. And I found this to be a huge gap in every single place I've been with more than a couple of teams. Elevating common themes from retrospectives doesn't really happen, and it has a huge organizational impact. The thing I said about environments, open defects that are not closed out, lack of production like data is a huge risk. And you can actually create an impediments and risks board, and I'll share some ways that I did that at previous places. You, if possible, you could be that person, the glue, to pull all these organizational impediment themes together and make a huge difference. Because number one thing I find is that people's impediments are not being resolved at the multi-team level. So where can we work to get better on that and really help people? It will just increase their engagement. They'll be so much happier at work. And here I have opportunities to facilitate impactful experiences. So let's say you've got 10 Scrum Masters or whoever is on the team that is on the team that's coming to these things that would know their impediments. You could have a lean coffee. You could do some sort of group retrospective. You could have something called an open space where you talk about the top challenges. It's a huge opportunity. So I really don't want to downplay it. If you could bring that value to the company, your company would see a huge turnaround in all the companies that I've been in. Show the real risks. I talked about some of those. If you bring up, teams aren't testing inside a sprint, they're leaving defects still just before a large release. I had UAT that was supposed to happen, the user acceptance testing, and it was delayed by weeks because it wasn't integrated till the end with data and the other teams, and everybody had waited till those defects till the end. Team doesn't have everything it needs to get something done. What an opportunity for you. Unresolved dependencies that nobody's tracking, right? When you have multiple teams, and JIRA doesn't do a really awesome job at you can tag it, but then how do you visualize that in a larger picture? Okay. People coming and going frequently from the team, that's a risk. I had teams that were continually migrating person to person across the team. I mean, you can't even call them a team at that point. But the risk there is you never get stability to the team. You never get team cohesion. And so that's a risk that you can actually bring up. Team has no access to customers to validate their assumptions. And of course, software having no unit tests or analytics or automation at all, because agility cannot really happen in an enterprise product like that if you have that without automation. And that's sort of like DevOps to enable agility. Okay. So this is an opportunity for you to reflect and find out those risks and show them. Now that you have gathered the problems, offer up solutions. I've used this chart in multiple places and they love this chart. Everybody loves this chart. So first of all, we all know what Agile good practice is, but if we're not following it, what do we do, right? Oops, I'm gonna back. Sorry. My bad. Product owner is supposed to be dedicated full time, but they have 4 teams. I think the most I've ever seen one have is 5 teams. Unable to collaborate. That's the risk. What is the impact? The team is delayed, right? That's an organizational impact. And then what is your suggestion to solve it? Team proposal to improve, or you can just say proposal to improve if it's not the team proposal. So this is a really powerful chart that breaks things down. And when I offered this up to any leader, they looked at it and they're like, okay, so now I realize where we're actually at. Sometimes the list would grow 15 or 16 lines long, but if you detail them out and measure the impact, and again, now you can go with the environments. Let's say that the environments was a problem and I measured that. So now you can go in and start measuring, hey, the impact on this is we lost 200 hours last month, because sometimes people really want that level of specificity. But now you're offering up a solution to them. So that's really impactful. And if you're part of a PMO or you have a PMO in your organization and they're wondering what they should do now, it's the role could be something like centralized guidance and support. And sometimes they rename themselves to Center of Excellence. It could be potentially central coordination for anything Agile. You can host open space and lean coffee gatherings for people. It's a very different way of working to engage groups of people versus command and control. It's so lean coffees have been very impactful. Is there actually agile transformation backlog? What are the outcomes that we're looking for from the agile transformation? So maybe you could even manage the transformation backlog and understand where we are as an organization. I did that at a previous company. We actually set outcomes for the agile coaches and agile transformation that were working with the team level to say, well, to meet this goal, we need to deliver something by this date. And so what does that mean? That teams must have their stories done and tested inside of a sprint. That became our goal. So we backtracked towards that goal. And so that became really important. But so any transformation backlog, however that may look for your company. You can research scaled systems and org design. A lot of companies scale by adding hierarchy and more managers, or they add developers to a team without thinking about the holistic system. So this is an area where you could research like SAFe, less, Scrum at scale and Nexus and things like that and get ideas. It's really across all of those scaled methods. The idea is we need to scale to deliver some customer outcome. So if you need to grow, try to scale a whole team that can deliver some outcome, right? Don't just add on people here and there. I had a team that just kept adding developers, and then there was no, they were using QA staff. They had no, not enough QA people. So then it's like you're growing, but you're not really helping the flow of delivering customer outcome. And there's an opportunity for you, of course, to extend agile practices and ideas to other areas of the company and bring them into teams and help the teams also. If you have the opportunity, coordinate lunch and learns, educate people on the value of limiting WIPP at all levels of the organization is, again, one of the hugest opportunities that I find is that we work on way, way too much. And the concept, if you can get it, if you understand the work in process that the company has, and you can get them to cut down on that, it provided huge benefits in all companies that I worked in that were able to do that. And it's a big shift. I'm just looking at the time. Okay. So opportunities here, if you can get to provide coaches and Scrum Masters for the organization, and you could get the opportunity to do leadership and manager coaching. Again, this is more at the PMO level, so it may not be as applicable if you're just doing the project manager role and you don't have access to that level. But I will say, if there are regular planning activities you could get involved in, a lot of places have quarterly planning activities or other planning activities, a place for you to get involved in. Solve those big organizational challenges together if you have that opportunity, even bringing teams together. And does the enterprise have a definition of ready and done, or is it only at the team level? So what's the integration of those teams? What does that look like? When we release to production, what does that look like? So setting this enterprise definition of ready and done. You may also have the opportunity, I'm trying to remember, at one place we called it MFRP, Major Feature Release Process. It's really important when you have a big release to even, you have to consider marketing and sales, right? So if you could think about the end-to-end process, where do we engage, let's say, technical writers into the process to start documenting? How do we know? We can't just release at the end of the cycle. Let's say, March 1st, we're going to release, but the salespeople haven't been trained. Nobody's aware. They're not marketing it because they don't know you're doing it. It's another huge opportunity for you to bring the entire value stream end to end and talk to people and figure out at what stage in the process should I bring marketing in and sales? Should we have, it's worked very successfully in other companies where we had a regular cadence of meetings with them to just share updates and little demos on what we were working on so that they can get engaged early enough to start marketing. Sustainable pace, quality. I know we're running out of time, and there's one other thing I really want to get to show you. I talk about facilitation, I talk about coordinating, and that's a really important skill. Value stream analysis is another really important skill, where I was talking about it end to end and look for gaps and delays. And then if you could be the person to perform this analysis and find out where the biggest delays are. Maybe it's pushing to production. Maybe like in another previous company, it was peer reviews sat for a week or two before they ever got picked up, right? So doing those kinds of things is also really important. shifting left on security and quality. So how do we build security in? How do we build quality in and start to have those discussions? Okay. And I'll say that I love the book Accelerate by Nicole Forsgren. And if you haven't read it, it will really change the way you think about metrics from an enterprise perspective. It's all backed by research. So look at the kind of metrics that she recommends, like mean time to resolve production incidents and lots of things. But I will say this in general, metrics, it's not just random metrics, right? They should be aligned to your goals. They should be actionable. What am I going to do now that I have this information? Is it easy to collect and understand this information? At one company, we collected number of production incidents per week, and the mean time to resolve those production incidents, so we can look into them and see if we can get better. But if they're not driving any difference in behavior, then why are we collecting them? Right? And of course, they don't stick around forever. Maybe the production incidents have gone down so drastically now that we don't need to measure this anymore. So start measuring something else instead. Okay. I touched upon this earlier. You can manage compliance efforts large across all teams efforts, like any federal compliance or documentation effort. And I was in charge of at a previous company audit for a financial firm. We ended up with highest marks, and I documented, I led them through the process, and that was really impactful for the company. Here's an opportunity for you, perhaps even where you are at now, a portfolio Kanban board. What is the single list of priorities in the business? Have we thought about a stack ranked list of priorities? Everybody has a stack ranked backlog. What about at the business level? Again, it's a big cultural shift for people to think about it like this, okay? But try to limit work in progress at the enterprise level. Is it aligned with our strategic vision? And did we get value out of it, right? Providing clarity into our business objectives. And then everybody should be able to know and see this. It's not just for special people, it's everybody. Okay. So other tips and tricks to delivering and budgeting, I promised I would cover this, so I will just say, I shared this briefly before. Integrate other teams outside development. Those orbiting skills, maybe a dedicated point person. Using definition of done for outside dependencies or checklists, getting stakeholders closer. There's so many opportunities to help bring people together to deliver better products. Budgeting and delivering. If you are in charge of budgeting, and I don't know if anyone else is here, the idea is it's very easy to fund stable cross-functional teams because the teams have a run rate. And if you fund the value stream, then the team run rate will be easy to fund, and you're just funding that team for those features that you're putting in the queue, and you can run it as long as you want. So you don't have to worry about staff allocation anymore, right? I touched on the staff allocation and build teams to deliver a business outcome. Okay. So these are the resources that I recommend, and I'll send the PDF so you can have it and you can refer back to it, because I know it was an awful lot of information I packed into this hour, but I'm really passionate about helping project managers be successful. I was one, and you can contact me. And Param, I believe you just wanted to share one other thing about facilitating before we had time for questions.
Yes. So perhaps we can take the questions first, and then I can share it so we can take it in a flow.
Yep, perfect. Okay. So anyone who it's probably a lot easier than to talk. So please unmute yourself if you have a question, and I'll be happy to answer.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you share your perspective about integrating sales with development in Agile?
Integrating sales with Agile teams? Is that
Yes.
what it was? Okay. That is a great question. I have found it to be extremely valuable to do that. I had a team that they met with the salespeople and they brought them into the team, and having that salesperson perspective was really, really valuable. Do they need to be in there all the time? I don't think they, from my perspective, I don't think they need to be a part of the core team, but I think a regular touch base might be one of those, what I call orbiting skill sets, that you call upon and have maybe a monthly touch base for them to come into the team, because they have all the access to your to what customers want. And from their perspective, they're probably hearing a lot of the pain points too. I do want to say, feel free to unmute, but I'm also, you can find me on social media. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. Love to hear about any challenges and pain points that I did not address, or maybe that I did, and if I helped you in some way, I'd also love to know that.
Okay, Heidi, I want to have a
Thank
question.
you.
What's the best technique to get optimum velocity from the team? Because what I see that always my capacity gets disturbed. Though my team capacity is, let's say, 40 story points, but most of the time it happens that we are touching to 20 to 25 story points. And what happens that from the management side, I have been forced to extend the release date. Though I am following all the artifacts and the values of the Scrum, but when I have to face a pressure from my higher management to extend, because they are wishing to put something in the market with all those values that I am unable to achieve.
Right. So I get that your team's committing to 40, but you're only doing half of that because they get interrupted. Is that what's happening? Is it they just overcommit, or they're getting interrupted?
Well, sometimes it happens that during the implementation of a task, we come across the elaboration of that story. Okay, if
Right.
I can say that was not properly groomed by the product owner in the product backlog or something like that.
I see. Okay. So I think I would actually collaborate with the team. I don't have all the context for what you're saying, but here's what I would do. The challenge that you're facing, I would take to the team and include the product owner or product manager in that team, because it seems like if it's only the product owner that's refining or grooming the stories, then they don't have appropriate context. The team should actually be doing that they should be doing that all together. So I would actually take that to the team, perhaps in a retrospective, and just ask, so here's what we committed, here's what we delivered. Let's figure out the root cause, not for blame. Let's move forward, because obviously we want to figure out how to get better. That's kind of what I would say.
So can we consider to involve the development team in grooming of product backlog? Because though that's a core responsibility from the product owner side, but most of the time, because the guys have to work on those stories, then they have sometimes much more domain with respect to that story background as compared to product owner.
Yeah. Yes, no, the product owner's job is not to do it all by themselves at all. They're responsible for ordering it, but the team and the product owner together have to groom it together, because to your point about context, technology, how is it going to be implemented? Product owner, that's not the product owner's responsibility. The product owner is, hey, what should we be delivering? The team should be providing the how together collaboratively, obviously not just one or the other, but collaboratively having that discussion. So I would definitely also take that to the team. Hey, here's the problem that we're facing, and ask them, maybe they'll come up with their own solution, or just offer it and say, do you think we could groom these together, and how do we get better? Because obviously that's going to help your velocity at the end.
Sure. Thanks for your input.
Yeah, of course.
So I guess this session was really helpful. So I got a question regarding when you are managing multiple teams of Scrum. So let's say you got around like 8 to 10 teams, and those are working in different projects. So I'm getting a lot of problem in managing all that portfolio in a collective format. So is there any suggestions which you can add regarding portfolio management stuff?
Are they each of those 8 to 10 teams are working on something different, not towards any shared goal at all?
True, exactly. So there are different projects, and all 8 teams are working on different stuff. So they do have their own Scrum Masters, but
Right.
as a head of services delivery, I need to manage all of them and take a insight look into them, and managing it in a nutshell. So if there is any kind of tools which are regarding the PMO, or maybe some kind of templates, or looking into the insights. So what I have done so far is I'm trying to manage those items on some of the Excel sheets and connecting it to a custom dashboard, which is providing me some of the insights. But I wasn't able to find a tool which can connect with all those JIRA projects and providing a, like a single view to look on all those projects.
Got it. I've used JIRA Portfolio, but JIRA Portfolio is heavily dependent on the teams being everything inside the team. Like the team is entirely cross-functional so that you can have that portfolio view. So are the teams cross-functional in nature, or they still rely on other people or teams outside their team to get stuff done?
Yeah, so teams are cross-functional, but at some points it's not about like one JIRA is going to get used. So
Right.
there are a few of the projects which are in-house. So all those projects are going to manage in single JIRA, but few projects which are client-oriented. So let's say if there are 8 teams, 4 of them are in-house and 4 of them are on the client JIRA sites. That's why uniform tool is not gonna help in that sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you need to pull it together, right?
True.
Yeah, okay. You know what? I'd love to chat with you about it. I have to go because I actually have to hop in an Uber and take an interview down the street.
Absolutely.
If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, say like Thursday or Friday when I'll be back home, and then I'll try to help you aside. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn if you would.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
So I can share one more thing now to take more time from you. If Heidi, you can stop sharing, I can. Then I can share one more thing from. Yeah, Heidi mentioned about facilitation. We do have some. We do have one course from IC Agile, International Consortium of Agile, on Agile team facilitation, and I can share the link in the chat afterwards. It helps you about the role of the facilitation, how to facilitate the meetings, workshops, collaboration, which is very much a skill that anyone from the project management will definitely need. And besides that, we also have some courses on CSM to understand the Scrum framework. We also have a course coming next week actually on CSPO to help them understand the role of the product owner as well. So if any one of you is interested to enroll on any of the session, please get in touch with us, and we are very much happy to help. Yeah.
Great. I'd love to hear. Yeah, I'd love to hear whether this session was helpful. Reach out to me, give me some feedback on LinkedIn or Twitter, or however you want to give it to me. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And by saying that, we will record this. This session has been recorded, and we'll share the link afterwards. Thank you. Your Uber might be waiting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for moderating.
Thank you very much, guys. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.